Hello everybody and welcome back to this tutorial where we are going to perform our manual SQL injection. We're going to need actually to do something, and that is to first of all start our OWASP virtual machine and go to the DVWA. Okay, so first of all I started it right here. All you need to do is perform the login, so root and then OWASP PWA. The next thing, and you can leave this actual leafpad file that we created in the previous video as something to actually remember once we perform the SQL injection, but I will close it right here. So save changes, we don't want to save changes, we want to go to the Firefox, we want to go to the 192.168.1.8, or in your case it is a different IP address, so make sure that you check it out first. Now let's go to the DVWA, which is the then vulnerable web application. So click on it right here. And we already know what the username and password is, so we're simply just going to log in with admin and password admin. So click on here on the login form, and right here we want to go to the SQL injection. Now you will see there are two types of SQL injections. There is an SQL injection which is a normal one, and there is an SQL injection which has in the brackets blind, which means that it will not get any output to the actual user, but that doesn't mean that it is not vulnerable to the SQL injection. And there are a bunch of different methods that you can actually check for a blind SQL injection, such as, for example, making the actual web page sleep for a few seconds and then reload the page or something like that, and then you will see whether the SQL injection exists even without getting any output or any error prompted back to us. Navigate to the SQL injection right here. So let's first of all see what this application asks from us, and let's test it with a normal input. So we can analyze this to have only one input right here, button, and we also have the source code, but we're not going to touch that at the moment. We're going to look at it later on. So we test for the user ID. So the user ID can possibly be a number, therefore let's specify number 2. Click here submit, and we can see that we actually get the output that says first name Gordon, surname Brown, for the user ID number 2. If we specify some different ID, for example, let's say ID 1, click here on submit, and we can see that the ID number 1 is first name admin and surname is also admin. Let's also try some higher number, for example, so let's specify 15 and click here submit, and we can see that actually once we specify 15 we don't get any result back. That's how we can actually find out that there are not 15 users in this actual database, because we're not getting any output for the user at the number 15. Okay, so all of this for now is good, but what happens if we input some special character in the ID input that might actually trick the database or the program or the code itself? Now, the most basic check, as we said in the previous video, for the SQL syntax error and SQL vulnerability is to input simply a single quote in this actual box right here. So let's see what will happen if we simply just specify a single quote. Click here on submit, and we can see we get an SQL error right here. As it says you have an error in your SQL syntax, check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL server version for the right syntax to use near, and then we have some quotes right here at line 1. So in order to actually understand why single quote is giving SQL syntax error, let's navigate to the source code that we have available. Let's navigate to the source code that we have available right here. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to find, as this is a PHP code, we need to find the SQL query in this code, and we can see it right here. So here is the SQL query, and let's copy it to the leafpad. So what we're going to do, we're going to copy just this actual line, as we don't really need the other ones, and we are going to copy it right here. Okay, so let's analyze what is happening right here. So we have the getID variable that equals to the actual SQL query that is then going to get searched for in the actual database. So we can see select first name, last name, so we're selecting two different variables. As we can see in the normal output of our program, we get the first name and the last name, such as for example the Gordon Brown, which was under the ID number 2. So we're selecting that from the users table, so we know that there is a table called users where the user ID is equal to the number that we specified in that box of input. So for example, when it is 2, we get 2 right here. But when it is a single quote, we get this. And that is the problem that I talked about in the previous video, where we actually confuse the application and therefore it throws us an error. Okay? So right now that we know that this is an actual vulnerable application, let's try a few other things and see what we can get. So let's open up our leaf pad and write the commands right there, as I already have it opened up right here. What I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to delete this, we don't really need it. And here, just so you can see better, I'm going to write the commands as we go one by one. First thing that we're going to check is, for example, let's check this. So 2, which is the ID number 2, and then we're going to specify single quote and 1 between the single quotes equals 1. Now the reason why we're specifying this, as we put this in here and click here on the actual submit, we can see ID 2 and 1 equals 1. So this will actually check for a condition if 1 equals 1, and it shouldn't give us any error because it is always true. So what this will do, if you go to the source code and we have user ID to be equal to, and then we use the AND actual command, which is part of the SQL language, and we check for 1 equals 1. And then we close it with a single quote right here. Okay, so the only reason we actually got an output right here is because 1 really is equal to 1. But if we go, for example, 2 as an ID and 1 equals to 2. So if we copy this and paste it right here and click on the submit button, you will see we don't get any output. Now it won't print out anything because 1 is not equal to 2. Also, the reason why we don't put apostrophe at the beginning at the end of our query is because we already have it in our source code, as we can see right here. So we already have this single quote as a part of our source code, and we also have this last single quote as a part of source code. That's why we are not putting them right here and right here. Okay, we already have that in our source code, so that's why we're not putting that, because we would get an error. Okay, so now that we performed some of the actual logical commands, let's go with the exploitation of the actual database. First thing that we're going to do is we are going to try to find the existing number of columns, and we're going to use order by 1 command. So order by 1. And after that, we're going to specify a hash, and the reason why we are doing that is because it was going to, the reason we type hashtag is because hashtag represents comment in SQL, which means all the code that comes after the hashtag will not be ran. And this actual command will try to find the existing number of columns, as I said. Order by 1 will try to see if there is 1 column, and then we will increase number until we find a number that doesn't correspond to any column, or basically there is not that many columns. So for example, let me just show you, maybe it is easier to see. Ordered by 1, if we simply just go right here, paste it, submit, we get nothing prompted back to us. That means that the column number 1 exists. If we specify 2, then we're searching for the column under the number 2. We click on submit, we don't get anything outputted, and that means that the actual column number 2 exists. If we go and specify the same command and go 3, click on submit, column number 3 exists. We forgot to actually specify 2 as an ID and run this command. So this is something we actually don't really need, and we can simply just type ID equals 2 and then order by 1. Let's see what we get. Yeah, we get an output right now. That means column number 1 exists. So let's go with the column number 2. And if we get an output right here, that means column number 2 exists as well. And if we go with the column number 3, we will get an actual error, as it says unknown column in 3 or unknown column 3 in order clause. That means there are only 2 columns in our database. Okay, so let me just add this, as I forgot it right here. Now that we know that there are only 2 columns in the actual database, now we're going to use a command called union select, and we're going to select first and second column and also type the actual hash for a comment at the end with the single quote. So copy this. I'm first going to copy it right here. Then I'm going to go to the actual page, paste that, click here on submit. And basically, if there were 3 columns, we would type 1, 2, 3. And right here in the actual output of this command, we can see that the first name is column number 1, while the surname is column number 2. And that is the actual output of our command, as we can see right here. First name. First of all, we get the output for the ID equals 2, which is at this part of the command. And the second part of this command is getting outputted right here, while the first name is column number 1 and the surname is column number 2. We're going to perform some of the function onto this actual page. So we're going to use number 5, which is the command. So to ID number 2, single quote, and then union select. And what we want to select is database with the open and close brackets, and then comma, user, open and close brackets, and then once again hash and single quote. Now the database function, every time you actually have a word like this and then open and close bracket, it will most likely be a function. So in this case, the database function will retrieve the name of the database in first name output, while the username that is correspondent to the database is going to be also printed out back to us. And you will see right here, if we just copy this command. So simply we are going to retrieve the name of the database is in the actual first name output. And here is where we should actually have it. So in the first name should be the name of the database. Let's submit this. And here it is. This is an output for the part 1 of the command, which is the ID2. And the output for the second part of the command is under the first name. We have the name of the database. And in the surname, we have the actual account or the username that corresponds to the database. And in this case, it is dvwa at localhost. Now that we got the actual database name, we can go further on. So now it actually gets a little bit tricky, as we're going to use some of the different words that we haven't used before. And the actual command that we're going to perform right now is, first of all, to single quote, union select schema underscore name, and then comma 2 from information underscore schema dot and then schemata, and then at the end we specify the hash and single quote. Now we should send queries for discovering tables in this actual database right after we perform this. And you will see the actual output of this command, and we can see that this is the actual name of the database as we discovered in the previous command. And right now, as I said, we should send queries for discovering tables in this database. We know there are 2 columns, we know the database name. Now let's send the queries for discovering tables. And we can simply just do that with this command. And the commands are going to get longer and longer. So get ready. The next command is going to be to, and then union select. And as I said, we are going to select the table name as we want to discover the tables. And then comma 2 from, and once again, information underscore schema dot tables, where table underscore schema, and then of course we need to set it to be equal to the name of the actual database. So dvwa. Make sure that you specify all the lowercase letters as it is right here, because that is the name of the database. Otherwise we will get an error. And at the end we specify hash and then single quote. This will actually give us an output of tables in this database. So let's copy this and paste it right here, submit, and we can see the actual tables in this database. So table, we have guest book, and we also have the table users. Now in our case, we might be actually more interested in the users table because it might store something interesting in there, such as passwords. Now we want to find out what columns are there in this users table. We're going to right now perform the same command, just instead of the table name, we're going to discover the actual columns. So let's go right here. 8, I believe it is on the number 8. So 2, single quote, and then union select, and now column name, so column underscore name. And the second thing that we want is column type from information underscore schema dot columns right now, okay, where the table schema, and now we want to choose the table from which we want to actually get the information from. But before we do that, we need to specify the name of the database, so dbwa, so the table schema equals dbwa, and table underscore name equals users, and at the end hash and then single quote. Okay, so what we're searching for now is we're specifying that we want to get all the columns from the database dbwa from the table name equals users. Okay, so let's copy this, paste it right here, and click on the submit, and we can see we get bunch of output right here, and we get the actual type in the first name. We actually get the name of the column, and in the surname part we get the name or the actual column type as we specified in our command right here. So the first name is column name, the surname is column type. We can see we have the column under the name user ID, which is the type integer. We have the first name column, the last name column, the user column, and what would possibly be the most interesting for us, which is the password column, which is the type of varchar 32, so it only stores up to 32 characters. So since we asked for column name type, the column name will be under first name, and as I said, the column type will be under surname. Okay, so that is easy to understand. Now we want to output all this information with one command. We know that we have two output fields, which are the first name and surname, so we'll have to concat some stuff to the first field and also concat other stuff to the second field. We can do it 3 in the first actual field. So we're going to concat user ID, first name and last name in the first field, and we're going to concat user and password in the surname field. Now this avatar is not really interesting for us, so we're not going to concat that. And right now let's write the command that is going to allow us to actually do that. So the 9th command, to single quote union select, and now we're going to call the command concat or the function concat. And as I said, in the first field we're going to concat 3 different things, which is the user underscore ID. Let's see whether it is called user ID. Yeah, it is called lower letter user ID. And then let's concat it with dash, and then first name, so first underscore name, and after it we leave empty space, so single quote and then empty space and then single quote, comma, and then last name. I believe they are called like this. Let's just check out. So first name with the underscore and the last name with the underscore, so it is like that. Okay, and then comma, and in the next field we want to concat the username and password, so we're going to concat it like this, user, comma, and then 2 dots to separate it, comma, password. Okay, now that we concated, we need to actually specify from where we want to get this information, and we're going to do that simply just by specifying from and then the name of the database, from dbwa.users, as the actual name of the table that we are specifying is users. Okay, and then the hash and the single quote at the end. Right now let's copy all of this, copy, paste it right here, submit, and right now you can see that we actually got the usernames and passwords for all of the accounts. As we can see, here is the admin account. We concated these 3 values. First one was user ID, the second one was username, or pardon me, the second one was first name, the third one was last name, and here in the surname field we have the username and then the password. Now you will notice for all of these accounts we actually have the hashed value of the passwords. Therefore, if we for example try to log in as Pablo right here with this actual password or hashed value of a password, we wouldn't be able to because it is hashed. Therefore, we can actually see how we can crack this hash. So let's try to crack all of these passwords. We can simply just do that by copying the actual hash value, and in order to actually discover what hash it is, we can simply just throw it into Google and paste it, And you can see in the first link it says it is an MD5 hash. So let's go and search for the MD5 hash decryptor. Okay, go on to the first link right here, and it says right here that we can paste up to 500 hashes, but let's just go one by one. Let's go with the admin. We already know that it will possibly be the admin even as a password, but let's just type it right here, paste it, and then decrypt. And we can see that this actual hash value equals to admin. And now we know that the actual password for the admin account is admin. Let's go for the Gordon Brown. Let's go with his password, or his actual hash value of a password. As they are all going to be MD5 hashes, let's just go right here, paste his hash value and decrypt it. Some of them, if they are longer passwords and not that common, might be actually harder to decrypt, but we can see that it found this one. So the password for the Gordon is ABC123. So that is his password. Now let's do another one, and then I will leave the last three for you. So let's try to hack the account, which is called Hack Me. So we know that the username is 1337. And let's see the hashed value of this password. So copy it, go right here into the decryptor, paste it, decrypt it, and we can see that the password is Charlie. So for this third account, the password is Charlie. Therefore, here now you know how you can manually exploit the SQL injection, as we can see right here in this example, and also how you can decrypt the hash values once you actually get the passwords. So that will be basically about it for the SQL injection. Now make sure that you practice on other websites as well, on other actual tools and on other labs. You can practice this SQL injection. It will not be the same actual path or the same principle every time to exploit it. This is just the path to exploiting this SQL injection, and it will most likely be different for every other type of vulnerability that you find regarding the SQL. So keep in mind, just find out different tables, columns, and see how you can actually gather as much information and steal that information from the database. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope I will see you in the next one. Bye!